more psych related and public Q&A. So if you got any questions, you can put them up in the chat there and we can go through that. Anything technically or psychology related or even model building wise, we can go through those. Otherwise, I just wanted to give a framework as to how to properly approach psychological issues, because I think there's a misconception about how emotions work and how psychology issues kind of come about and how to solve them. So you're not making the same mistakes over and over and over again, right? So we'll go through that. I'll give you kind of a checklist that I use in order to approach, figure out, and then ultimately eliminate those issues. And then if you want to take notes, you can. Otherwise, it'll be recorded and posted up on the YouTube vids section of this Discord. So yeah, if you're just now joining, anything is legal. Obviously, it's just a public Q&A / psychology. So if you got anything you've been struggling on, you put those up in the chat. But I'll get on my little lecture first while we're starting. So obviously, psychology is maybe 90% of the issues that you'll come across once you learn the technical side. The technical side isn't terribly difficult to learn. I think once you understand it, is very repeatable, right? Like you get to a certain stage in your learning where there's nothing new that you have to learn. It's all the same kind of stuff day in, day out. And now you have to practice discipline and the psychology side of it, right? So there's going to be major psychological issues, and they all have root causes. So first, I'm going to try and describe, if you've already been here and you've already kind of understand psychology, it's not going to be anything crazy new, but it's going to be sort of a contained lecture of what psychology is and how to defeat it, right? Where does it stem from? What are the roots? How do you find those roots, solve them, and then approach a new day with that kind of learned knowledge, right? Yep, I'll record it and post it live after. All right. Dragon says, I usually have a strategy that works until I get an L, and then I start making changes to the strategy and then spiral down to taking L's. We'll cover that later in the lecture for sure. I'll just remind me if I miss out. But psychology as a whole, obviously, it's two sides. So everyone knows it as fear and greed. And it's the same scale, just on two different spectrums, or two ends of the spectrum, right? It's just on one end you have fear, on the other end you have greed. Very, very linear side, but every single psychological problem will have both sides, right? So if you look at FOMO, for example, FOMO is the fear of missing out, but it's not just a fear, it is also paired with a greed, which is the greed of wanting more than what you should be having, right? If your model states that you don't trade at 9:30 and then someone else is posting a trade setup, or multiple people are posting a trade setup in this Discord or somewhere else of a trade idea, you're going to feel FOMO of missing out, but it's not your model. So you're being greedy and wanting something that's not yours. Or you're looking at someone else, they have something else that you want. What is that? That's greed. That's envy. So every single psychological problem will have two ends of the spectrum. Until you understand that, it's much harder to, you're not going to figure out each individual psychological problem if you don't look at it with, there's one side that I have to fix, and there's another side that I have to fix. And you fix both those sides, that problem will remove itself. We also understand that, so we'll kind of put these truths about psychology. Everything is fear and greed based. That's the first kind of label. Two, all of these sort of psychological problems are rooted in typically one of two things, which is either a lack of understanding or an illusion. And these illusions can be based from past experience. So we'll call that scar tissue. It can be from others, or it can be from a lie or a misconception you tell yourself. So most times, say that you have an illusion that good traders don't lose. Well, then every single time you take a loss, you have this illusion that, did I spell illusion right? I don't even think I spelled illusion right. You have an illusion that every single time, I think it is that. Every single time you take a loss, I'm looking this up now. I'm. Is it two L's? Like that? I think just two L's. Yeah, I can't spell. Fantastic. Every single time you take a loss, you're going to think that good traders don't take a loss. Therefore, it's based on an illusion that you tell yourself And there's always a truth in that illusion. I'll like kind of explain of how to fix these problems. But we know that all psychological problems are fear and greed based, not one or the other. All problems are fear and greed based. There's two sides. You know that they're also rooted in a lack of understanding or an illusion. One of those two things, right? There's probably going to be other kind of um, methods as to how you develop psychological fears and things like that, especially when there's a lot of scar tissue that builds up, right? Then it makes it even harder to reinforce that those bad habits. And obviously, I guess bad habits would be another kind of thing that you have to conquer. But this way, it's a linear approach to solving psychological issues, right? You look at them as problems, not this overhanging thing. A lot of times, they're also rooted in the subconscious, and you can't really realize they're there until you consciously think about it and have introspection in order to bring about these subconscious problems to the surface. We address them, and then they dissipate and become dust. All right. So when you look at all these your problems, you know, you have to have at least some sort of data collection. So your data collection is going to be your journal, right? I suggest for most people when I'm on a one-on-one call with a lot of people, when they're at the stage of psychology and how do you fix psychology, first you have to be self-aware, right? So the first step of self-discipline is self-awareness. So if you're not self-aware, how the heck do you expect to fix your problems? You're not going to be able to because you don't know that you're even committing them in the first place. So you need to be self-aware, right? And that's going to be uncomfortable. Self-awareness is going to mess with your ego because now you're going to have to look at the faults that you are, look at the problems that you have, address them, and acknowledge them. A lot of people don't want to do that, right? It's going to be very uncomfortable to do that. So you need to be journaling. You need to be when you take a loss, when you do something stupid, not when you take a loss, but when you do something stupid, right? You stray away from the process. That's where you need to approach it. You need to look at that right in its face and approach it for what it is. It's an issue that you have. It's no one else's problem, and you have that problem. And that's the ego part where you have to take your ego, move it aside, and step in and actually confront the issue. But the way you can journal properly is by journaling before, right? Journaling during, and journaling after. All right. Most people just talk about journaling after, right? Every single person on every guru on YouTube, whatever, always talks about, you journal after. It's true. It's probably the best one you want to be doing. But there's also benefits in journaling before and during, right? You journal before. Now, what are you removing? You're removing any expectations or baggage you're bringing into the session, right? If, say, you're one day from a payout, and then you have now this subconscious expectation that you're going to take a win today, and then you lose, well, then there is your gap between, psychological problems come from a gap between reality and your expectations. And that's where you have disappointment. And that's where you have your over leveraging, your coping mechanisms, basically, right? Coping mechanisms. I'm I'm a very biological person. Like I'm not biological. I'm very attracted to the biological part of trading, right? I think psychologically, like if I were to be approach individual issues, I think a lot of it is in our biology. I think we're all, nothing new under the sun. Human nature is human nature. So the way that we're all hardwired, there's an approach to fix that. Obviously, it's going to be different for everyone, but going across the facts of looking at biologically, we're all the same. You can look at that as the first step to creating and solving those issues, right? So, over leveraging and over trading are not the issue. If you think those are the issues, they're not the issues. All right. It's a facade. It's just the coping mechanism you use to deal with pain. All right. So when when the reality doesn't meet your expectations, you're left with disappointment and also pain. All right. And every single time you feel pain in the markets, you're going to lead right to your coping mechanisms. And think about how easy it is to just press these two buttons up here, right? It's very, very easy to just come over here, add a couple more contracts, and then click sell. Like 3 buttons, click 3 mouse clicks, right? Just to get that dopamine feeling. That's where your discipline has to come in. So coping mechanisms comes from that, disappointment, the pain that you feel in the market. And also when you are very outcome based, your outcome based thinking. So we're trying to get to 2 different scenarios here, which is basically you want to be process focused and process based, and then not care about the outcomes. Okay, that's the pinnacle of trading psychology, right? Is kind of getting to that sort of level. So we'll get to this sort of stuff as well. But we know that there's these issues that are rooted in the subconscious that have these character traits of them. The way we can spot it is by journaling before, during, and after. And when I say during, this is going to be the hardest part. You need a model in order to do this. But basically, an example would be we're trying to short the market, hypothetically, in demo. We get filled in here on a gap, and it comes back, and then it starts to retrace back up towards our entry, right? A lot of people are going to feel fear inside of this. You have a stop loss maybe up here, right? So while this retracement is happening, when I'm talking about journaling during, what you could be doing is 10:17. I feel a retracement pushing back toward my stop loss. Therefore, and then you're using what's called injecting logic to fix that. So I'll kind of explain how to create injecting logic, but realizing when those things are happening and how to spot those emotions in real time, really, really useful. Okay, so basically this is how you become self-aware, and you're spotting emotions. And emotions, like I said yesterday, are never the problem. All right, emotions are what? Emotions are signals. All right, emotions are signals to underlying problem. You need to use emotions. You can never become emotionless. Do I have an audio problem? Everyone hear me? I hope I've not just been yapping this entire time. It may just be you. Yeah, Spaz, you may have to just restart. Oh, I'm not gonna tell him to restart. So we're human, so emotions are not going to be the problem, right? You're never going to be able to become emotionless. You can have less sort of reaction to emotions. That's what you want. But in order to spot the emotions, you need to use them, right? Fight or flight is your friend because you identify there's a problem, and now your body's going to automatic mode where you don't want to think. So spotting those emotions and staying in a prefrontal cortex logical state of thinking is what you want to be doing. So you're using these journaling techniques to spot your emotions, and then those emotions will lead to the underlying root cause or the problem, right? So this, once you can spot that, you're then translating your limbic state. All right, your brain has two states: limbic state, and then you have the prefrontal cortex. All right, these are both areas of the brain that deal with function in your brain, right? Your limbic state is emotional. It has your amygdala, your hypothalamus. It's also linked to your heart rate and dilation of your eyes, dilation of your blood vessels. So you get more blood everywhere, i.e., you don't think, you act. All right. But you need to stay in a prefrontal cortex, or at least have a very specific way you can deal with being in that limbic state. So we're trying to stay as much as we can in this logical thinking part of our brain. All right. Yeah, this is your animal brain. This is you. All right. But your animal brain, this is processed by subconscious thoughts, right? This is your reflex. So how do you think Navy SEALs and how do you think a bunch of people train their reflexes? Is by showing up in training. So now eventually your reaction is just to, you don't think anymore. It's just a muscle memory sort of, you pull out your pistol when your thing is, you know what I'm saying? So you need to get to a state where when you're activating that limbic state, you know exactly what you need to do. And there's no resistance to it. You don't want that resistance. You want to just know what you need to do and act. You don't believe in your model, you know. You can't believe in something that you don't know, don't already know, right? You don't believe 1 + 1 is 2. You just know that's the fact of the thing. So if you know the fact of the thing is to do exactly what you need to be doing, which is turn off your chart, go get a glass of water, go do 5 push-ups, go make breakfast, and then come back to the chart at 1600. If there's no resistance to that, it's very easy to just follow through. And now you're concerned with what? The process. You're concerned with what you need to do rather than whatever happened in the market that you can't control. There's nothing to that. All right. I'll get to the other questions as we go along, but I just want to get all this out first. So I'm in a very laser focused mental state. So we're using this journal before, during, and after to spot these emotions that will lead to the underlying root cause. All right, and I'll give examples for this as well. But we know that those root causes go back to this, which is basically they're going to be rooted in the subconscious. They're going to be based on a lack of understanding, and they're going to be illusion based, right? And they come from this as well. All right. So When you can see that and you can spot it, then you see what the problem is, right? If you're just trying to wake up at 9:20, get a bias for 10 minutes, tape read it for an hour, take a trade, maybe blow an account maybe, and then you turn off your charts, you don't open up your journal, and then you do the same thing the next day, you're not going to be successful. Period. End of story. Like there's no doubt about it, and you know that. So anyone who's doing that, you're not going to be successful. I'm sorry, this isn't for you. If you want it to be for you, you need to do the things you need to be doing, which is all of this stuff, right? Journaling, figuring out what's wrong with your mental, figuring out what's wrong with your model. If there's nothing wrong with your model, then trusting your model, finding the data to see how successful your model is. So now when you skip a day, you're not worrying about missing a trade, right? The fact that I can skip a day, like on Tuesday, I slept in. I sleep in. So my process is I sleep in for 30 minutes until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And by the time I wake up, then it's already too late for me to try and rush to find a bias, rush to get in a trade. I'm not scrambling. I normally will just sit in bed for like 15 minutes, read my email, look at the Discord, see if I got any questions, and then I'll carry about my day. And then after about 2 p.m. when I get back from the gym or when I get back home around 1600, if I don't have any one-on-one calls, then I'll open up the charts, see what happened. And if there's nothing there, then there's nothing for me to learn. All right. But the way I'm able to do that is because I trust the fact that on high probability days, I'll be able to read the market. I'll be able to find a setup. I'll be able to execute on that setup with low risk, high reward. And whatever the outcome is on that setup, I can't control it. That's where you stop, right? It's not the fact that I can show up on those high probability days and win. That's not it. Because I may not win. Then what? Then you go back to this. Your expectation is to find a winning setup on that day. You're not trying to find a winning setup. You're trying to find a high quality setup. You're trying to find days where the probability of you winning is highest. You're trading probabilities as a trader. I don't care if you're ICT, I don't care if you're retail. You're trading probabilities. You're not the market. You're not a PC. You're not an AI. You're not going to be able to read the market with 100% hit rate. Think about this. If you have a 99% win rate model, the 1%, if you still don't know how to take a loss, you're going to blow up your account. Right? So you're reaching for something. The most you can ever reach for as a human is what? The most you can ever reach is 99%. You're not Jesus Christ. You're not ever going to be perfect. So the most you can ever strive for is 99%. So with that logic in mind, you're trading in probabilities. There's always going to be the 1% opportunity that you lose. You need to know how to deal with that. So in order to get yourself in a state where the highest probabilities are likely that you're going to take a winning trade, then you're going to position yourself in those opportunities. So I'm positioning myself in opportunities that I know I'm going to be able to read the market properly. I know I'm going to be able to be disciplined. I know that when I'm going to be able to take a loss on those days, I'm going to be more likely to be process focused. And it's going to be very low resistance for me to go in and turn off the charts because I'm like, damn, it was a clear bias. It was a clear trade. I took the trade. My stop loss was right. My take profit was right. And then I got ticked out by 2 points. Whatever happens after that is whatever happens. But my execution there was perfect. That's what I'm concerned with. I'm process focused, right? So positioning yourself in days where it's going to be highest probability is going to benefit you in these kind of situations. And obviously, when you get to a point where you understand your model a whole lot, you're going to be able to trade every single day. You're going to be able to come into the market and just tear it up at any single day because you know how all the time functions, all that stuff. Like in the PDF, right? I've given you basically every single profile of every single day in the New York session, how to trade it and what macro or function of time to use, as well as what entry model to use. So if you have that, you should be very, very confident in the fact that you know how to trade every single day possibly. Not yet. And that's your ego that thinks you're some god thinking that you can be able to trade low probability days when you can't. You'll be able to, just not yet, right? It may take 6 months, it may take a year, and that's fine, right? And don't compare yourself to me either, especially if you're not over like 6 months of learning. It's not going to be possible. I have maybe like 4 or 5 years I have 5 years in the market about just like by studying it. And I have probably 3 years in like extensively studying ICT, 3 to 4 years of extensively studying ICT. That means like, showing up and probably studying for about 4 hours a day at least. So you want to be trading in the beginning when your probability of winning is highest. Not the probability of winning, but also the probability of you finding a model and then following the process after you take a trade on that model. So this process is going to be the same When you win, it's the same when you lose, because all you're concerned with is what do you need to do every single day. That's it. Stop trying to think about the outcomes, or stop trying to think about how long it's going to take to reach a payout. Stop trying to think of how long it's going to take to get out of drawdown. Stop trying to think about all that stuff. That stuff you can't control. You can't force the market to give you 3 winning trades in a row, right? I can't force a coin to land 3 times on heads. I can't. I can flip the coin, but I can't demand it to land on one of those things, right? I can't manipulate it. All I can do is I can control the coin in my hand and flipping the coin, but I can decide when I want to flip the coin, right? So going back to this, you're going to be doing the same thing you're doing every single day. Whether you win, lose, or don't take a trade, you follow the same process. You journal to find emotions that lead to underlying root causes, and those root causes will be based on either a lack of understanding or an illusion from yourself, scar tissue, or other people telling you what you're supposed to be thinking. And those are going to be based, some sense, on fear and greed. All right. And that fear and greed, when that psychological issue comes up, you're going to find that reality doesn't meet expectations. That creates some sort of pain. And then our body, when every single time we are met with pain, has coping mechanisms. All right. Most of these are going to be unhealthy coping mechanisms, like crashing out on family members, or over leveraging, or over trading, or being in a bad mood. We want to remove those. We want to replace them with healthy coping mechanisms to reinforce the fact that we're process focused. There's nothing wrong. We're not a terrible trader. And then we can continue to go into the next day of thinking about, even if the same exact thing happens today, I need to know that I'm not going to blow up, and I know that I'm a good trader, right? It's self-belief that is rooted in all these things. All right. So by finding these problems, we now have an approach. How do we fix these problems, right? Well, there's going to be random problems that show up. You can probably find and name a couple that you already have right now. Maybe you're worried about your model not performing, or you're worried about what happens when I take a good loss, right? Like, how do I, when everything is there and I get ticked out by 2 points, how do I take that as a good loss? What do I do? So how do you fix psychological problems? So this is normally something I only give to like individuals when they're struggling with it, but it's taken in some sense from Jared Tendler's Mental Game of Trading book, but I've kind of added onto my own stuff with it of what I seem works for me. Obviously, you can do the same with whatever works for you. There's not one way of trading that's perfect. So what you're going to do first is spot the illusion. That comes from, like I said, being very self-aware, and that's going to be difficult if you have an ego in front of it, because the ego is like the rock. Or you got to move the rock in order to find the problem. But you're not going to think you either have problems, or you're not going to look at the problems in order long enough to actually understand what's going on. And that's why sometimes having people you trust to talk about it with you, or to address and spot those problems for you, is beneficial, because they'll give it to you straight. They're not going to sugarcoat it. And if they really have the best interest for you in mind, then they'll be honest with you, right? So spot the illusion. Then the second part is where it's going to throw off a lot of people. And Jared Tendler, when he explained this in his book, it kind of threw me off as well. Let me actually give a header to this, but this is how to solve. Spot the illusion, and then you're going to explain why that lie or the illusion is correct and has value. So this is the part that's going to throw people off, but basically, you're going to spot the illusion. Maybe the problem is you trade low probability days, and that's rooted in the illusion that you don't trust your model and you don't think it's going to be there every other day. So you trade low probability days and you lose in whatever after that. But the fact that you trade low probability days, the illusion is there, but the validity of it, and explain why the lie is correct, is you think that either, I've spent, maybe for me, right? I've spent four years studying ICT markets. I have a community that I teach in. I've gotten, multiple payouts, thousands of dollars in payouts, et cetera, plus. So I should be able to trade low probability days, right? That's logic based. And maybe for you, it's the fact that if you trade on low probability days and you don't trust your model, you think that I'm fearful that if my model isn't there, that I'm not going to be able to pass a payout quick enough. And it's going to ruin me, right? Because then I have to pay more, or I have to reset it, or whatever. So there's validity a lot of the times in your illusions. There's some sort of thing that you're telling yourself as to why you don't want to fix it, because that's what you're holding on to. The fact that, okay, the lie may be a lie, but at least there's some validity to it. and it's like reinforcing my worry. All right, and there's something wrong with that. It's what everyone does, and we all have these kind of illusions in our life outside of trading that we tell ourselves is perfectly fine because there's some sort of underlying thing we're trying to protect. All right, so in order to fix that, you need to then actually think about, okay, why is that incorrect, right? And this is where you're going to be creating some sort of injecting logic, but this is going to be logic based. So why is that lie actually incorrect, right? Then you're going to be creating some sort of a logic. Why is the logic correct? So you're going to spot the logic, right? This is where you're going to create basically your injecting logic statement. So create injecting logic statement. And then you're going to have 5. Why is that logic correct? And then 6 is going to be implementation. So now you're taking your problem, you're figuring out why it has validity, you're explaining as to why that validity is incorrect with logic. Maybe my model states that I have a 2.5R. So even if I don't trade on those low probability days, I still have at least one trade per week that's going to net me potentially a 2.5R. And even if I take 2.5 trades after that are losers, I'll still be at break even. And there's logic there, right? And then you create an injecting logic statement that's maybe 1 to 3 sentences. You'll write out, and then you'll read to yourself every single time you feel that emotion rising, because that emotion is paired to this. So whenever you feel that emotion rising or that thought spreading like a germ in your brain, you go back to the injecting logic statement, you read it a couple times. And now what you're doing is you're calming yourself down with logic. You're like, okay, I've already had this problem. I know how to fix it. You have something either on your desk or something you tell yourself that beats that problem, right? And you see me do this live, right? When I say, okay, I have my stop loss there, I'm not going to close it out before my stop loss because what? I pay my stop loss a lot of money to do its job properly. That's my injecting logic. It's a statement I tell myself, I tell others, that removes this idea of the fear that I need to close it out before. Because the fear is, oh, I need to close on my stop because what if my stop gets hit? The stop, your logic, the underlying logic and value there is you're going to take a large amount of money. So why not just close it before it hits your stop loss, right? There's logic behind it, of course. But that's incorrect because now you're not letting your probabilities play out. If your model says to put your stop loss at the breaker high, then let it do that. Because if it gets 2 ticks next to the breaker high and then rolls over, now you're creating a loss outside of your model because you couldn't have the patience to do it. And your injecting logic is I pay my stop loss hella good money to do its job properly, and my model states that this is my line of invalidation. So why am I closing it before my line of invalidation when the trade is still valid? Then you have that injecting logic, you read it to yourself, you remind it of yourself whenever you have that thought show up. And then eventually you don't have that thought anymore. It's like a non-existent problem. It may get close and you still may feel your emotions and you clench your fist and you start dialing in, and as it gets close to your stop loss, but you realize then what? It hits your stop loss, you have a process you need to follow, and you'll never blow up if you constantly manage your risk. If you constantly are cutting your risk after you take a loss, if you constantly are then stepping away and you're not going to let yourself, you're the only one who's going to make yourself blow up, which is nice because now you know, okay, if I have full control over myself, if I have self-belief, if I know how to fix these problems, I'll never blow up because I know how to manage my money enough to where I cut my risk after I take a loss. I pay my stop loss a good amount of money where one trade is not going to blow me up. I might not get stopped out. Or my stop loss is my friend because it's there to just tell me when I'm wrong. I may have to, it's the cost of doing business. I may suffer $1,000 loss or $2,000 loss off of a stop loss, but it's just the cost of doing business. You're a risk taker. You're incurring risk. It's just a lost sale. But are you going to just quit the business and crash out because you have one lost sale and one lost customer, right? Are you going to break the coin in half, the weighted coin in half, just because it lands on tails once? It's irrational to do that. So when you look at it with that point of view, it's like it's so much easier to then trust your model and trust what you need to be doing because there's some sort of injecting logic that you use. All right. And then it's the same cycle. You're basically spotting emotions, spotting the underlying root cause. And then you go back to this. You go to the solving statement. And then now you have basically for every emotion or key problem that you have an injecting logic statement, right? And a lot of times these are rooted in something, right? Like if whatever you find the most valuable. Like if you think you're smart, if you think you're strong, if you think you're whatever, if you think you're a quick learner, whatever um, your best trait is, you think as a person, whenever you take a loss, it seems like a direct threat towards that. All right. So, for example, if you think that you're a very quick learner or you're intelligent in the markets and you're blessed enough to be trading, when you take a loss, you think that the market's telling you, haha, you're so stupid. Look at the fact that you read it wrong and I'm taking money from you. So you're going to think, oh, I'm going to show you that I can read it right and I'm going to take another trade. And then what happens when you lose that? You go into the emotional downward spiral of then over leveraging, over trading, and eventually when you hit rock bottom. And then you're like, what the heck did I just do? Right. And if you've not experienced that, I don't want you to experience that because it's a terrible feeling, to be completely honest. But just understanding that, you have these statements you tell yourself, I am a good trader. That's why these kind of affirmations that people think are whoop-de-woo. I think if you can reprogram your subconscious into believing that you're a good trader, you can read it correctly, you can take a bias, you can find a good trade, you know what you're supposed to be doing after a loss, you're never going to blow up. If you know those things, then what's the problem? You're not going to have the problems there. If I know that I'm a good trader and I know on every single day of the week, I can look at June's economic calendar and I can tell you on the second week of June, what days I'm going to be trading, what model I'm going to be using each of those days. Why would I be worrying what days, if my model is going to be there or not? It's going to be there every single day. It's just some days it's easier to read. It's not a question of if your model is there. It's there I promise you, your model is there every single day. You're going to be able to argue a high quality trade. But it's just some of them are easier to read. That's why I tell you to look at perfect hindsight. Because sometimes when you look at trades, like look at Tuesday of this week, right? Tuesday of this week, there's nothing I can go in and there's going to be a model, right? You can go into this day, you can go to the 1 minute, and I can show you there's probably a macro setup or a 930 setup, right? Oh, here, boom. Whoops. Right in here, shorting opportunity or long opportunity, whatever. If your 930 entry, you price action still moves every single time it moves, right? You can say, oh, there's this setup here runs the PM session high, or you could be taking, this rejection block retracement on the 930, whatever. But the probability of you reading this and trading it in high probability conditions is much easier to trade those macros and setups. I'm not going to be able to come into the day like this, find a bias that's one, correct, two, that I feel confident in being correct. If I can't find a bias that's correct and confident in, as soon as I see something that's opposing my bias, I'm instantly going to flip. And if I instantly flip and I take a trade in that direction and the bias was right in the original way, then I'm going to be tempted to take a second trade in that original bias. Then if I take a loss on that one, then I'm out of control. So instead, the simple fix is just go back to the beginning. Don't even look at the day, because then you're not even worrying about that possible outcome. Just skip the day. Right? In the beginning, that's what you need to be doing. And like I said, as you progress, you'll be able to trade those days, but then you'll realize, why the heck would I not sleep in, even if it's a low probability day? Why would I just not look at, like, I don't want to work, right? Like, it's work. Why would I not want to get 30 minutes of sleep? Why would I not want to look at the charts today? Why would I not want to go and value the freedom that I've gotten from trading and actually go do something with my life that I enjoy? Go outside, go play a sport, go work out, go make breakfast for your family. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's trading isn't everything. It's just a means to the end. It just gives you freedom. And that's it. Because then what then? When you have everything that you want, when you make enough money that you want, when you have the freedom that you want, what do? You'll realize that there's nothing better to do than follow your rules. Because that's the discipline you need in life. Without the discipline, you're nothing. Right? It's either you're disciplined to the McDonald's application or you're disciplined to yourself in trading. There's no life without discipline. You don't just get to sit around and do nothing. So what you find is when you get everything that you want, you're still going to have to be disciplined. And then you have to find the joy in the process, joy in the things outside of trading, the joy in life of doing the little things. And that's when your life is just bliss, because you just should wake up. It's a new day to do exactly what you're doing. You don't have to worry about money. The nice thing about money is not having to worry about it. Anything after that, I think, is vanity, right? The cars, the watches, the whatever. It's great for maybe a week. But if you're not doing it for yourself, then it's like this, you're lacking something. You're flexing for other people to get their validation. All right. And I'm not trying to get validation from a world that rejected a perfect man, to be completely honest. I don't want anything to do with this world. So, with that in mind, you're taking this as a means to your end to complete the job of getting freedom. follow your emotions, know that follow your emotions and follow your rules, and just know that, your rules are not there to limit you. They're there to protect you. They're the safeguard. That's the safety net. When you fall off the ski lift, when you fall off the thing, it's the harness that you have attached to the rock. So even when you slip, you're not going to fall all the way down. But if you don't use that, if you're just free soloing, the chance, like, that just, it makes no sense. If you do fall, the chance of you falling, it's an ego that's attached to the fact that you're trying to climb the entire thing without any safety because you think that you're that level of trader. What happens if, why not just have one little thing in the rock that in case you slip and fall, you have a safety harness where you know you're not going to blow up, right? So you take those emotions that you find, you solve them, and then maybe you only have maybe 25 problems, right? If you only have to do this 20, like, it's like 25 problem sets. If you only have to do this 25 problems times, and then in 2 weeks you're making whatever amount of money you want to make, isn't that easy? It's just a little bit of pain. It's a little bit of just going into your room with a journal and a piece of paper and fixing the problems you have. It's just slightly uncomfortable, okay? But it's better than spending thousands of dollars on evals and blowing accounts. You know that, right? This pain of discipline, that you see in front of you is way, way easier than the pain of regret, of blowing accounts, of struggling, of taking years and years and years of being in the same spot and listening to other people and working for other people when you could just do it in the first place, suffer a little bit of that pain in the beginning, but then you're like, oh, why would I not do this? Because it's everything that I wanted. Everything that you're missing, the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. It's that famous quote, and it's true. Everything that you're looking for, and the how come I can't figure it out, is because the thing that you know you're supposed to be doing and approaching, you're not doing it because it's uncomfortable. But I'm telling you, if on the weekends, on the days you're free, if you just, instead of looking at the charts for 25 minutes or for 2 hours or whatever, however long you trade, you just open up your journal, you open up a piece of paper, you open up your Notion, whatever, and you read your old journal inputs, you figure out the emotions. You have to become your own psychologist. Like, you have to figure out what the heck is wrong with you, because the market is a mirror, like everyone says. It's going to just show you exactly what's wrong with you in your psychology until you figure it out. And until you figure it out, the same thing that always has been will always be, right? Nothing will change if nothing changes. So you fixing a model is not going to fix your psychological problems. Your issues are not in the fact that you can't read the market every single day. Your issues are underlying in your psychology, right? Those technical things, I can fix probably every single one of them, or ICT can fix every single one of them, right? Like, it's just like, oh, draw it from here, or oh, don't look at this, or oh, here you have to pair the order block with the inefficiency. It's technical, it's logic. It's very easy to fix those things, right? There's resources all over my YouTube channel and the PDF and this chat that you can find to fix those. Very easy. The psychological problems, I'm not going to be able to fix every single one, because only you're going to be able to really go in and dig deep as to what these things are stemming from, right? And if you want to go even further, a lot of these kind of, the threat I was talking about, where it'll threaten your sense of self, that's rooted in even childhood stuff, right? Like, if you were, if you had some relation with your parents that wasn't good, or some trauma you faced in your early childhood that kind of made you feel like this is who you are. So you have coping mechanisms that are probably healthy now, but if those are threatened, then you have this kind of reaction that you do, right? And it's a lot. There's nothing new under the sun, in the sense of it's very predictable. You can kind of just approach anyone. When you get to a certain level, you'll be able to kind of just walk around life and be like, oh, he's doing that because of this. And you don't have any judge for them. You don't have any, like, ill will or intent towards them, because you've been in the same exact spot, and you know that, oh, if only they did this, they would fix it. So you don't have any resentment or hate or ill will towards someone who's not doing as well as you, because then your pride is getting the best of you, right? You got to stay humble. You just fix the problems you do. And then if you want to, and if you're willing to do it, you help others around you. I think that's the only logical thing. I think if you were to have something that you think is great and you keep it to yourself, it's like, how much do you hate that person, right? So hopefully this is the process, and shed some light on how you figure out those problems, how you deal with those problems, how you implement and fix the problems, and become more process focused, right? Everything is try and become process focused. Find dopamine and value from completing the process. I spelled that wrong. Completing the process. So basically, that's what you're trying to get for. If you can wake up every day and just know you're getting dopamine and good coping mechanisms out of doing what you need to be doing, it's easy. Trading is so easy after that because it's like there's no more struggle, there's no more pain. It's just even when you take a loss, it's not a big deal because if you take that loss, you're not going to blow up. It's not an attack against you. It's just you simply read the market wrong. And that's it. You simply read the market wrong. And you're not perfect, so it's expected. The max you can do is 99%. Right? The max you can't be 100%. Stop thinking you're going to be 100%. If you honestly think that you're going to be able to read the market 100% of the time and always take a win, you can't trade. Like there's no way you're going to be able to trade. All right? Even if you have Enigma, like even if you have Enigma, if it coded an error where one time out of the 3,000 times it took a trade, if 299 times it took a win and then one time it took a loss, and you don't know how to take a loss properly, you're going to blow the entire thing because then you're going to try and fix it over and over and over again, and then your entire account's gone, right? So stop trying to find something in the charts that you're looking for. It's not there. It's just in your brain. Figure out that first, and then you'll realize that the learning part is so easy. Like that's time and price it's very repeating, and it does the same thing every day. It's just variance. It's just kind of like different colors of the same object. Right? It's the same object. It just has different. It's like a snowflake. Everything is a snowflake, but every single one of them looks different. How is that possible? It's you can still spot a snowflake, but some of them have the same pattern, and you can pick those up better in your brain than others. Some of them just don't make sense. Right? The market's always going to move. I said it on Friday. Right? I had a bearish bias on Friday. I was looking for the sell side from the previous day, down here, previous week, daily low, this orange line. And if you watch back on the stream, there's nothing in this that I was super confident about taking a short. And then at this point, I was basically ending the stream around here. And I'm like, if it comes down here, then what happens? I know that I can be really confident if it sweeps this. I can be like, wow, look how good of a trader I am because I didn't take a FOMO trade off this. I didn't go out of my rules to take a short and just try and get a win just to get a win and just to get the feeling of trading, right? If you think that trading is doing something every day, it's not. It's just you think that trading is showing up. It's not. Trading is doing the thing that you need to be doing regardless of how you feel, right? So if it traded down here and took out the stop, I could look back at that once the alarm hit and I'm like, wow, look how good of a trader I am because I knew that something like that was going to happen. The market's always going to move. I couldn't read it properly. Even though it ran to my bias that I think was going to happen, I couldn't find a high quality trade because if I couldn't find a high quality trade, that means I can't find a high quality loss. If I can't take a high quality loss, it's much easier for me to get emotional, right? You want to be taking good enough trades where you're comfortable with the losing opportunity. If you lose, you're like, wow, that was such a good damn trade. I don't even know how that lost. And you're like so happy the fact that, okay, it was a tiny risk, beautiful 6R trade. I lost, so be it. I could care less. That's the kind of losses you want. And you're forcing those, not the setups, but you're forcing yourself into those kind of environments. And like I said, if it came down and ran this stop loss off, so be it. If it came up and chopped around and did this, exactly what it did, so be it. Because then I'm even more happy that I didn't try and get in a FOMO trade because I would have been stopped out here. And I'm like, look at that. There's nothing in this. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad I took a trade. And this just looks like, why would I want to be trading this? Right? So you got to be, I'm inviting it. Please come down here. I'm already accepting I'm not going to find a setup. Please come down here and run this because then I can be so confident in the fact that I'm a good trader because I know how to execute properly. I'm not trying to force something that's not there and I know how to be disciplined. And if it comes back up into this, I can be even more happy. That's how you have to approach this market. Like rewire your brain and stop thinking that it's FOMO of, oh, I missed this trade. Or I don't wake up in the morning and then go into London session and be like, wow, I missed that 240 to 250 to 310 macro there that would have ran out my buy stops that I had marked out from pre-market when I was up looking at the charts at 9 p.m. Like, what? That makes no sense. Like, how are you're gonna look at everything in life with that same kind of approach? And that's not a livable approach you're ever gonna take, right? So who cares that it did this? and it traded into there and it ran up. It does the same exact thing every single day, every single part of the market, and it's not going to stop. So you don't look at the New York session the same way. You don't look at the New York session and try and look at this and be like, just because it's moving, I need to get in a setup. Just because it's an 8:30 news day, I'm expected a setup, right? This was an 8:30 news day. Just because it says on the economic calendar, it's red hot. It's telling you it's most likely the highest probability that it's going to be a red hot day. That does not mean that you're owed a setup. It just means that you have one piece of the puzzle, right? There's three pieces of the puzzle. You have economic calendar, you have higher time frame, and you have lower time frame. If I can already cross out one of these things, then it's much easier to just check these two off, right? On low prob days, or maybe the days where we don't have any news, I have to take this and go, okay, is the economic calendar valid? Okay, it is valid. Is the higher time frame valid? Okay, it is valid. Is the lower time frame valid? Okay, and then do I find an entry? Yes, no. Okay, now I can take a setup. Then yes, I can take a setup. But if it's 8:30 news day, I can remove one of those things. Okay, 8:30 news day, boom, I don't need the economic calendar, or I don't need that kind of perspective. I'm just looking, does the higher time frame make sense? Yes. Okay, then I can move to this. Does the lower time frame make sense? Yes. Do I can find an entry? Yes. Boom. Stop thinking after that. Win or loss, it doesn't matter. You just stop thinking after that. Can I find a good quality entry? Yes. Boom. Right? But if it's but then there's going to be some days where it's like Tuesday, right before an 8:30 news day. The economic calendar already tells you that it's a no. So then why would you be going to the higher time frame, the lower time frame? You can always frame a bias. You can always frame a setup, like I just said. But are you going to be able to see it with the probability that we were talking about here? And if you can't see it, and if you have an expectation, you're going to find a trade that causes pain, that causes the coping mechanisms. So your goal is to just not have any expectations. You have zero expectations for every single day because what? You know that your model is going to be there every day. I'm expecting my model is always going to be there. I can trade every single session. I can trade every single time entry. I can trade 9:30, 9:50, silver bullet, 10:50. That's all I need. I know there's going to be an entry every single day during that window of 9:30 and 10:50 of time. Every single day. Doesn't matter the news. Doesn't matter if it's NFP. Doesn't matter if it's FOMC. Doesn't matter if Powell speaking. Doesn't matter if Trump's speaking. It's always going to be there. But am I going to be able to read it correctly and take a good win and be able to walk away from the trade after I journal and be like, wow, I can not have to worry about trading anymore, right? That's what you want to be doing. You want to be taking a trade where as soon as it's done and you're journaling, you don't think about it. And that goes for both sides. Don't think that you can try and just take a win. And then as soon as the win is over, you're going to be like thinking about how good of a trader and how good it feels to win that entire day. Because that's the other side of that you're going too far to this side, right? There's two sides of the same thing. So you can have one time where you're thinking the entire day about how stupid you are or whatever, right? It's L mentality anyways, but you shouldn't be thinking that. But I'm trying to get what I'm saying here. You're going to take losses. Don't think about that the entire day and don't dwell on that. But at the same time, when you take wins, don't dwell on that either because it's part of your model. Just because you make $3,000 on the day, don't feel overly happy about that because it's an expected outcome. You did what you're supposed to be doing. Here's your payment for it, right? It's like, here's your payment. It just messes with you. The market just likes to screw with you it's like, when you're in a job, you get paid every 2 weeks. It's the same paycheck every 2 weeks. But then think about if you showed up to a job, the first week it did negative 500, and then the second week it just did 2,500. So you're still getting paid $2,000 in the next 2 weeks. It's just they're going to screw with you and just take some money out of your bank account and then put it back in. It just messes with you, but you're still getting paid the same amount. That's what trading is. You have a model that says, okay, I'm going to produce this amount of win rate with this amount of RR. And if you do it properly, I'm estimating it's going to be $20,000 in the month. Boom. But those $20,000 is not going to come in one trade. It's not going to come in 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000 on the week. It may be minus 2,000, plus 7,000, plus 5,000, plus 5,000, right? It's going to be split up. It's going to be a variance, but you don't know what that variance is going to be. You don't know how many losses in a row you're going to take. You don't know how many wins in a row you're going to take. But if you know that, one, I'm never going to blow up because I have risk management. And you two, if you always know that you're a good trader and you say and do exactly what you need to be doing, trading is easy. It just screws with you. It's just uncomfortable because it's like minus 500, minus 250, plus 2,000, whatever. It's just like a variance. and that's annoying. I agree. But you're here to show up, do what you need to be doing, and you get paid to make right decisions. If the right decision is not to trade, there you go. You get paid. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but you're going to get paid for it. All right. And the nice thing is, when you wait really, really long, and maybe you're really disciplined, and then boom, that one time that 7 hour setup shows up, and you can just destroy it. You're like, it feels great because you're like, I was not the fact that you made a ton of money, but the fact that I just spent all that time being patient, and then boom, it showed up. I executed with the same exact process I've always been executing, and then now look, here's my payment for it, right? So that's my mini lecture. I say mini, I'm gonna be going for 50 minutes, but I'll screenshot this if you want it, so you don't have to go back and do it yourself. But I'll screenshot it, post it right there if you want it. I'll put it in psychology as well if you lose it somehow. But download that and use it. And I suggest going into Monday, going to tomorrow, about working on these things individually, right? Maybe spending 20, 30 minutes just you set aside during the day to address these things, right? And if you don't do it, it's not going to change anything, right? You have to be doing this, to be completely honest, right? It's part of the job. This is part of the job, is being, you signed up for this. If you're in this Discord, if you're in this call, you signed up for this. It's uncomfortable, but you have to be doing it. All right. So you don't have to do it on the weekends all the time. You don't have to don't look at it as, oh, I got to do this. It should be exciting, because if you can figure this stuff out, like I said, if you only have 25 problems, you can solve that. Maybe by July, you're making $30,000 a day. And you don't have a limiting belief and think that that's not possible, because who said it's not possible? This is what I'm talking about. It's an illusion. It's a limiting belief that you have. It's possible, right? It's not impossible in trading for you to do that. And there's people who do that. But don't have that illusion and that limiting belief and thinking that it's not possible, or thinking that you're not good enough to do that, because you're perfectly good enough to do it. It's just an understanding of yourself. The numbers and the math speaks for itself, right? If you have an 80% win rate in a 6R, you're gonna blow it out of the water. All right. So I'm gonna delete this off the chart. We'll get into the questions now, but I hope that made sense and resonated with some people as to kind of how to fix and address those psychological issues. And I think it's important that you learn some of that, instead of just the technicals 24/7 that everyone talks about. I usually have a strategy that works until I get an L, and then I start making changes to the strategy and then spiral down into taking L's. That's, I mentioned that before, right? It's once you have a good understanding of your model, you're always going to want to tweak it, but there's going to be some times that you have to realize that you're not going to be able to read it correctly, and therefore you just skip those days. There's nothing wrong with your model. It's always going to be there. It's just going to be more of the fact that it's going to be harder to read. So accept the fact that you're not going to be able to read it perfectly, and therefore you just don't take that second trade. I think for 90% of people, you need to have a one trade mentality. If you're looking to trade the day, your trade mentality should, I'm a sniper. I'm waiting for this one setup to form. And if I take that setup, that's because it's the highest probability setup out of that sequence of price action. If you're just thinking with the mentality of, oh, I have 3 shots in my gun. The first shot, it doesn't matter if I miss, because then I can take the second shot and then the third shot. The quality of your shots are not going to be good. If you have the one shot mentality, if I've got one bullet in this chamber, I got to make it count. But even if you don't want to take the shot, you can wait till the next day. Isn't it so much easier to trade? Because then okay, the trade that I take, it's going to be really high quality enough to the fact that I feel confident to pull the trigger. Where then if I miss, I can come back the next day. But I'm not going to say you should have a multi-trade mentality, because to be completely honest, in the beginning, it's just going to be detrimental, because then you're not going to be focusing on what you need to be focusing on. You're going to think that you have some lifesaver with the second trade, but then what happens when the second or third one loses? You're in a much worse position financially in demo than you are, and mentally than you were, right? It's just not as beneficial, I think. All right. This sounds like my psych teacher. Real. Is it bad not holding for the full TP? Let's say I know where price is going to that sell side, but my daily profit of 150 is met, so I close the trade really early. Maybe I focus too much on PL. Exactly. You already know the problem. I really don't think anyone should have a daily goal, because it's that kind of stuff there that you'll face, right? Because either one of two things will happen. You'll meet your daily goal and you'll not close it off there and you're trading your P&L. Or what happens when your daily goal isn't met? And then do you feel this need that, say your daily goal isn't met for one day? Okay, I can deal with that. Daily goal isn't met for 2 days. Now do you feel like you're in the hole and now you've got to try and fix something that doesn't need to be fixed, right? So I think at a minimum, absolute minimum you should have is maybe the weekly goal, but even that I think is too short of a time frame where you're going to have red weeks, right? So it's if that's a thing that I wouldn't even say have any goal. I think those goals are going to be met if you just focus on the thing you need to be doing, right? Like obviously a swimmer is the goal is to win the race, but they're more concerned with I need to train. I need to show up to training. If I'm just constantly infatuated with myself of winning and not actually doing the things I needed to win, you're always going to be in that spot. So I think if you remove the daily goal and remove a weekly goal and just focus on trading the price action, it's much easier to hold those trades. So I would say there's going to be, to answer your question, there's going to be some days where I realize it's not going to go to my full TP and I'll take partials along the way and I'll close out my trade early. Um, like on Wednesday I was just trying to scalp it short until the sell side. Took a trade. It was like a 50-point short to the sell side. Got tagged. I had another runner about 30 points down. Moved my stop loss to break even. I got stopped out there. So it never hit my full TP. I took one off early, but that I already knew the conditions were it's low prob. I'm most likely just finding a scalp on this day. So I'm not gonna be demanding something that's not there. And having that as that's the daily bias for me. You don't see everything that I'm thinking in the daily bias. It's more of like a summarized version. But if I screenshot it and I show you what I was thinking on that um on that Wednesday, right? Price action is not cleaned up, not demanding anything more than a scalp at best. What am I doing? I'm setting my expectations where I'm either going to get no trade or at best a scalp. So I'm not going to try and demand full TP. I'm not going to try and hold it all the way there. So in the beginning, I think what you want to be doing is putting your stop loss, putting your TP, leaving it. You pay your stop loss a good amount of money to do its job, let it hit it. You pay if you know where your TP is supposed to be, if you're targeting, London low and you're trying to short it, and every single time you've saw your trade and it goes all the way there, then you should probably be holding it to that, right? And just let it play out. Um, if you're trying to trade a daily goal, then it's going to be much harder to do that. So focus more on the price action, right? Focus what's on the chart. If it lets you on the chart hold it to there, hold it to there. If on the chart it's showing you, okay, order flow is now flipping, then maybe you move your stop to break even or you close it up before that. But then you have to deal with the consequence of, if I closed out before and it runs to my TP, am I going to be worried about that? Or is the right decision at this point to be closing it out before my trade says I should be getting stopped out? So when you do something, think about the two potential outcomes that can happen. Either it's going to go to your TP, you're going to quote unquote win, or you're going to get stopped out and you're going to quote unquote lose. So having those expectations and knowing what you're going to do as a reaction to each of those is much easier than, just doing it just because it looks like that. And then you're freaking out because then if it hits TP or if it hits your stop loss, you're like, oh, I should have done this. You don't want should have, would have, could have, what ifs. You want what is. So you deal with the what is in trading, the what is of your actions, and then you go from there. All right. Yeah. Process based versus outcome driven. Exactly. Haven't taken a single trade this month and I've been really at peace. There's times this week where I felt like I had to change or add something, but then I'm remembering if it doesn't fit my model, I don't have to trade, and that's that. It's funny because every time I start to have slight thoughts about not taking a trade, you always post a video about not forcing and being process focused. I'm like, I'm doing good. I love it. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously going to be a point in time when you do understand how to trade outside of your model. I'm not saying to do it, but I'm saying there's going to be a certain point when you're going to understand how to trade low probability days. You're going to understand how to trade certain scenarios like scalping, like on Wednesday, right? I don't have a specific entry model. I have a specific kind of viewpoint of the market that I wanted to follow, and then I can get in. So I don't have like I have time-based models like 930, 950, silver bullet, stuff like that. But in terms of the price action, it's not going to give me everything that I want. But I think if you're in a good, peaceful spot and you're like, I understand that everything is working great, obviously that's exactly what you want to be at. You just show up, and you're at peace, and it's so much easier than trying to scramble and find setups and force things that aren't there, right? Question: do you have TradeZella and journal with Notion? I'm not going to pay for TradeZella to tell me things that I can just figure out myself, so I just journal with Notion. um I have a physical notebook too as well. I've got a couple of those that I'll journal in. um I think writing it down is helpful, but I do journal with Notion when I'm don't have my journal, or I just want to type it up. If it's going to be a long one, I don't like writing it out. I have like much faster typing speed, so I'd rather just type it up. And then like in terms of like P&L stuff, I'll track it, but that'll just be a Notion as well. I'm not going to pay $40 a month for something I can just create myself. But if you can't create it in Notion and you struggle with that, and you want like just self-collected data, I think TradeZella is great. Just personally for me, doesn't work. Just like New Week Opening Gap, right? There's going to be stuff that you don't use that other people work. And if it works for them, then great. Technical question: are there times you ever anticipate a wick being rebalanced, counting as a meaningful manipulation target before going to withdraw liquidity, or is it something you've seen in hindsight that you'd use to help with your bias? Um, Unless it's like, I wouldn't look at the wick as being meaningful manipulation. So I would rather look at, is there a PD array? It's specifically a gap or an order block that it's retracing into, like a reclaimed gap, right? If you have like a reclaimed inefficiency and it pairs up with that wick, then that's reasonable. But I'm not going to use a wick as meaningful manipulation or as a target or anything like that. Um, for meaningful manipulation, I either want to see ERL, IRL, or an order block at worst case for that to count as meaningful manipulation. I'm not going to target a wick. I don't deal with rejection blocks. I use wicks, don't get me wrong, in terms of inefficient price action, but it's not inside of my analysis of like, oh, there's a wick here. Let me target the wick of this because it's inefficient of whatever in there. If it, you know what I'm saying. So swing high, swing low, imbalance. That's all price goes to. So that's what I'm going to use. We'll have to race and type racer. Yeah, I think about like one. My highest, I think, on monkey type was like 140 words per minute, but on my average is like 99 or something, like right around 100. Not too much, man. But we'll wrap it up there. I wanted to keep it short and psychology based. We'll have probably a technical one sometime either between Saturday, nothing on Sunday because of Easter. So it'll be tomorrow or on Monday. Obviously, I'll send a ping out. It'll be recorded as usual, and that'll be posted later. But this one will also be posted later today. So, are you trying to get me assassinated? Drop a fun fact about the Bank of International Settlements. I don't think I will. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. Maybe next stream I'll let you know. But anyways, I enjoy these. Hopefully you enjoy them as well. I like just ranting my psychology part on stream because I think it's useful, and I always kind of wanted someone to do it for me. Obviously, ICT had his Twitter Spaces, and if you're in here, I know ICT's kind of been off the rails, and I don't even really know, but he's been up to nowadays. So here's my Twitter Space esque sort of streams. All right, so take care this weekend. Spend time with family and friends if you can. With it being Easter, get away from the charts. You know, find what you think is meaningful for yourself. And like I said, if you've got time, go back in and figure out one or two of your psychological problems that have been hanging over you, and defeat them. Right? Look at them as opportunities, not problems. You're a business owner, right? You're a business owner. You're managing your own business. Problems are going to happen. Problems are there to get fixed, as Drake said. So don't just not expect they're not going to have any problems. Invite them, encourage them, look them as opportunities right in the eye, because every single time that you fix a problem, you're one step closer to success, right? So take care. I will talk to you guys soon, and good luck and good trading. Peace.